Quick note about couplers being tricky. All right, so here we have a classic coupled line coupler. Now the lines aren't microstrip lines, so this isn't quite as visible from the top as I would prefer, but this is the coupler that I had that opened, so this is what we're going to work with. With the DC beeper on the multimeter, I've just verified that in fact this port is DC short to this port. This port is DC short to this port. But there's no DC connection between this port and this port, or this port and this port, if you remove the terminations, of course. So the idea just is that you have two loops, and then the loops get near to each other in the middle, and then coupling happens in the middle. Now, the tricky bit here is that your intuition might say that if we apply a signal into this port, then the coupled forward signal will come out of this port, right? The input signal comes in and goes out, but it couples a parallel response, and that travels in the same direction, and it comes out of this port. But in fact, the coupled signal, you apply a signal here, the coupled signal comes out of this port, the near port, rather than the far port. And so let's just do some measurements to observe that happening. All right, so here we're using the vector network analyzer like a scalar analyzer. I've just got a through calibration because that's all we need are amplitudes today. So let's get rid of the through connection, and let's start connecting to our coupler here. There we go. We're applying a signal into port 1 here, and then we're going to measure the output on the near port. And so this, in fact, we do see coupling. In fact, we see a lot of coupling. We see that our coupling is only 2.4 dB down from the applied input signal, which is quite spectacular. And that's the reason for the construction with the coupled lines smashed together rather than microstrips. If you had microstrips like this, you would not get 3 dB of coupling. All right, let's remove. Now let's look at the far port, the far coupling port, and see if we observe a similar amplitude. I guess if we're below 3 dB, we cannot possibly, but just let's see where we are. Is this the coupled port or the isolated port? So let's attach port 2, and we see minus 17.4 dB. So this is actually this is the coupled port, and this is the isolated port. Even though the intuition of the signal hopping to the coupled line and traveling in the same direction says that this should be the coupled port, evidently the experimental reality is the opposite of intuition. So I'm working on recalibrating my intuition to match the experimental reality that the coupled port is the near port rather than the far port on the adjacent line. And still working on that. So let me know if you've got a tip or a lead on some better intuition. Thanks.